Welcome everybody to Sharing Soulful Stories, and today I'm with Cheri Dostal Ryba. Welcome, Cheri.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm happy to be here.
Let me tell everybody a bit more about you. So Cheri is a mama, lover, wife, writer, Franklin Method movement educator, and a yoga therapist. She invites people in to explore how their body moves, cultivate presence, and create greater capacity for self-compassion and resiliency. Watching her clients switch on again and experience tangible changes makes her heart sing. She teaches dance improvisation circles, mentors yoga teachers and yoga therapists, and will soon be submitting a book proposal about pelvic floor health. She lives in California with her husband and their daughter, Fern. Welcome, 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 Cheri.
Thank you, Joe.
So, as you know, we are here to share stories of spirituality, and I am hoping through this to allow people to see just how different and varied those different stories are. So, would you be willing now to tell us your story? How has spirituality become part of your life?
Thank you. Oh gosh, where do I even begin? Life story in 20 minutes or less, right?
Yep.
And yeah, as a kid, I think it's fairly common that people are maybe raised in the church in one fashion or another. So I remember as a kid, like maybe kindergarten, first, second grade, going to the Bible church as a family, my two brothers and I. And it was a bit of a short-lived season. I think it was, my parents wanting to do the right thing by us and give us some kind of religious background or like foundation as we were very young. And what I remember most is actually running around in the church basement playing games and getting really stinky and sweaty as a kid. But I do remember singing and some other things as well. And then, as a family, it sort of drifted out of our like normal day-to-day lives. And I found myself around probably 6th or 7th grade going to a Baptist church. I don't remember if I started dating the boy I was dating before or after coming back to the church. But his family, his parents were youth pastors at this particular congregation. And so I got very involved and, went every Sunday and then every Wednesday for youth group, and really enjoyed the expressiveness of singing and worship and prayer. It felt good to bring that part of me back. And then somewhere in middle school, things just kind of started shifting where our relationship was strained with the fact that he was going to be moving out of state, kind of a cross-country move. And he was challenged by that, rightfully so, as a young man. And right around the same time, I actually lost a family member. My brother passed away in a car accident. It was April 5th of 1996. And so with those two events, with this, rock solid relationship, all of a sudden feeling very different, and then my family experiencing a big loss, it was a whirlwind. It was very surreal. And I did my best to try and comfort him, and, we can visit and we can talk on the phone, and, this isn't like a final ending. This is different than death. It was really difficult to walk that line. How do I comfort and give him compassion and support while I was grieving? And ultimately I ended that relationship. That's fine, Joe. Decided to break off that relationship because I had enough of my own growing and healing and grieving that needed to happen. And I remember the funeral. One of the things for me, spirituality wise, is nature, connecting to nature and being outdoors. And that's one of my most powerful memories from the funeral, was being outside at the cemetery, and these huge pine trees were just towering over all of us as we were, circled around the gravesite. And I heard the wind kick up, and it just drowned out everything else. I couldn't hear, the pastor who was, giving a talk, or the prayers really that were happening. I just heard the wind. And that was like, okay, he's here, he's with us. And he had such an amazing spirit about him. He was creative, adventurous, snowboarded, traveled, cooked pizzas, made art, so it was, I think how I continued on with my spirituality journey from that point was really trying to just feel close to him. Church fell away kind of altogether with the end of that relationship, and then the start of high school, which, having something like that happen in a small town, a small community, it was 3 young men about the same age. They were 19 when they passed. I was 14 when it happened. And so it was a big deal for our whole town. Like the entire community showed up for the wakes or for the services. And it was pretty heavy to be young during that time. I remember going back to school just a few days after he passed, wearing his very large gray corduroy pants and having to have this big belt cinched so that they would actually stay on my hips. But I started wearing his clothes. I picked up biking. He was an avid mountain bike racer and things. And that was the only real tie throughout high school, was trying to feel close to him and trying to sort that out, while I also was wildly busy and productive, as too many teens are with extracurriculars. So it was a really, really intense time. It was probably the first time I saw my dad cry ever, when Mike died. And it took until about my senior year of high school, maybe college, to come back around to what I knew then as spiritual practice, which was coming back into some kind of a church setting. And ironically, it was with another young love, another boyfriend, who also, his parents were youth pastors. So I don't know what that trend says. I'm not even going to worry about analyzing that at this point in my life. But it was interesting that it was closeness and relationship and I suppose intimacy, although I wasn't sexually active as a teen, that closeness that brought me back to God and desiring that aspect of my life to, have time and energy poured into it. And that relationship was challenging for its own reasons, and really great for its own reasons. It was around 8 years, and high school sweethearts, dated all through college, got married. Through that time, had another big wave of grieving my brother's loss, or brother's death. I don't think I really all that actively processed that as a high school student. Also had some really surprising forgiveness come up for my dad, with some of how I was raised, with just very strict presence in the household and a bit of an abrasive quality of, between him and my mom, and by no means abusive to me directly, although a difficult environment at times. So it was around that same time that I was realizing that I had a huge grudge, towards my dad, and had put it all on him. My mom, in my mind at that point, early 20s, my mom was the victim and my dad was the bad guy. So I matured a lot through that process, feeling like, oh, they both are playing a role in this dynamic, this relationship dynamic. And I need to figure out a way to actually love my dad and forgive him. And so lots of time praying about that. He's softened over the years as well, which is nice. He's definitely gotten a little more softer, tender, still a pretty gruff, large guy, but it's been sweet to see him change in that way. And then, so graduated college, got married. My first husband and I moved to a small town in Wisconsin. And I have always been ambitious, always been pretty relentlessly curious about life and how it works and how we heal or not, right? Like, what is resiliency? How is it that some people can kind of bounce back from adversity or experiences, and then others, it seems to really take them down for a longer period of time, or maybe the rest of their lives? And how can we find resiliency and healing? And that ambition in my 20s was definitely more ego driven. Confidence often read as arrogance by some people around me once in a while. And I was working in a fitness center manager job for about a year and a half. It was really difficult on me and the relationship. I was managing, part-time employees, opening the gym at 4 or 5 in the morning, working evenings, working weekends, doing sales, and couldn't really see. I was determined to figure it out. I couldn't see that, the plug just needs to be pulled on this whole situation, and you need to be doing something else for work. And that was one of the big pivots where I felt like, okay, God is truly in charge. I am not. And I showed up for what I thought was a regular old meeting, and there were termination papers on the table being slid across to me to sign, and I was fired. And yeah, it hit me super hard initially, but only for like a blip. I was surprised that, 2 weeks later, I was like, well, that wasn't working anyway. So it was a really nice, confirmation that I was being guided, that something else needed to happen work-wise. I started my own business at 25, seeing private clients, and at that time doing more personal fitness, personal training, exercise stuff. But I was happy, I was working for myself. I could set my own time, my own hours. It felt great to earn money that came in kind of through my own actions out in the community and through relationships with clients I already had. And my first husband and I, we rebuilt our relationship after that as well. Like, the job put so much strain on us that for a while after, all through spring, summer, into fall, was kind of a rebuilding chapter for us. And I think it was around May that he brought up, what do you think about having a baby? I was like, I'm not ready. I don't know about this. Like, we've just had a rough patch. Let's wait a while. And so we talked about it, had a good summer. Communication back and forth was that things were better, between us. That's what both of us were saying. And then in September, I conceived. A few weeks later, he was done. He left the relationship. And of course, the few weeks leading up to it, I had some suspicions or some curiosity about his behavior changing, and tried to talk with him about it. But overall felt like blown over by a truck or whatever, just was hit by a truck with it. Was really surprised, didn't see it coming. We hadn't talked about him being unhappy or anything. And yeah, so a couple different things happened. I was pregnant at the time, and he left, and I spent most of that fall weeping on the kitchen floor, first of all, but also trying to pray my heart out, trying to figure out, how am I going to love this baby? How am I going to love this pregnancy and this child and co-parent with him? I have to figure out how to want this baby like I did a few weeks ago. It wasn't necessarily that I ever thought of ending the pregnancy by choice, but it was such a rough time that I was on empty, spiritually pretty much on empty, and was wondering, how on earth am I going to make this work and be present, for this child, present for myself through this whole thing. And praying. I finally came around a little bit where I was starting to feel a bit of joy again, and getting a little bit bigger and feeling movement. So I thought, before a miscarriage happened, well, actually I didn't miscarry. I was told, I know, Joe, deep breath. Yeah. I was told that the pregnancy wasn't viable. I went in for like a routine appointment and was told the baby was not living, not a viable pregnancy. The fetus was only 8 or 9 weeks in size, which to me is again another huge like divine intervention, that I didn't miscarry naturally when hormonally things were continuing. I was still pregnant according to HCG levels and things, but the pregnancy wasn't viable from about the time that he left.
Wow.
And for me, that was, okay, this is God stepping in saying, it would be more than you could handle to have both of those at once. I'm going to stay with you and hang with you and keep you pregnant and answer that prayer of like, I want to love this child. And I had just come around with that joy, and then had the next news come. And I had surgery the next day. They were concerned about hemorrhaging and a bunch of other medical mumbo jumbo that all came back negative. They couldn't explain why I was still pregnant. And again, for me, that was a confirmation of faith that, okay, I'm being watched over. And I had time to process the separation first and take care of myself and set some boundaries. And I was even in church that night before, feeling like, oh no, this is okay. I think I'm feeling movement and this is okay. And, maybe I was delusional, but I don't really even care, because it was a source of purpose and contentment and safety to trust that everything was good until I learned otherwise. It took a little longer for my human self to like take off my ring and realize he wasn't coming back. And that was actually one of the key moments that I knew it was not ever going to be the same or ever going to work out. Was in one of my conversations with him, I asked him, I don't know how you can just be done, like we've done church, we've prayed, we started our relationship in that sort of support network of having the church family around us. And it's hard for me to understand how there's nothing left. Like there's always more, right? There's always more love or compassion or possibility or communication. And he said, I don't want God. That I don't want God. And that was a moment where I thought, oh, right, this probably is not ever going to work or be the same again. And it took my human self a lot more weeks and months to untangle from all of that. But at least there was a bit of clarity there where it was like, oh yeah, we want really different things. And it's finally out in the open now that we want different things and we view the world very differently. And during that separation, I made a list. I'm having fun telling you all of this. I hope it's fun for you to hear it. I made a list at some point before the divorce was final, while we were separated, when I was just like absolute rock bottom. I thought, I'm going to learn through contrast and make a list of what I absolutely desire in my next partner. Because I knew I wanted marriage. I knew I wanted kids. And, now I have Fern. She's about 2 years old. So I made a list in my journal, and then I found it months after meeting Jason, my now husband. We've been together almost a decade. It's crazy. It feels like, how is it almost 10 years? But that list that I made at rock bottom, he fit it to a T. I was like, oh, check that out. Like, he dances, he's educated, he works with people, he's kind, like all of these different traits. But the dancing was the big one. I studied dance in college. My first husband hated dancing. I should have known. However, when I met Jason, I was like, oh, wow, this is what love could be like. This is what passion could be like. This is what true, intimate, like soul level connection can feel like. And I'm so grateful that not of course grateful for the hard times, but there's always learning available. And again, that kind of optimistic, curious streak in me is always willing to try to figure out, well, why did this happen? What does this mean? What am I going to do with this experience from here forward? How do I want to live my way through this? And yeah, so kind of spirituality or that faith, again, is kind of an anchor that rock bottom doesn't keep me at rock bottom, but it can be a valley for a period of time. And then we study ourselves and seek support and find our way to the other side of that experience. And things are always changing. So, yeah, I feel like I'm going to pause and have a bit of tea.
Have some tea. Have some tea. Wow. I did not know a lot of those massive challenges that, like, there's some big ones in there. Really, really, really big ones. And please don't, you're pausing for tea. Is there more to the journey you want to share before I move on to the
goodness?
How else is spirituality unfolding for you?
Well, it's interesting, before we were recording, you mentioned politics, that came up in one of the interviews, and that, like these intersections of spirituality, politics, daily life, and how it all influences each other, like all throughout my young adult years, being more affiliated with or attending, more of a Christian based church, Christian teachings, abstinence was the only way, and pro-life was in the Kool-Aid. And, if you didn't believe in pro-life, then it was somehow just this awful, awful thing. Like, how could you allow babies to die? And after my miscarriage and my separation and things, I at that point had support through some of my first husband's extended family. It was a Pentecostal church. And it became really clear to me that, submission is not my way, not my belief system. Growing my hair long and wearing skirts and denying my physical body and my sexuality is not going to work for me. In that same year or so, I felt sort of compelled to be a support person for other women going through pregnancies with rough circumstances, whether wanted or unwanted, whatever was happening in their relationship or their home. And I did actually an 8-week training, like a volunteer program, through a pregnancy crisis care center. And that was before I went to New Zealand the first time, which was my sweet freedom trip after my divorce was final.
Nice.
And I went through the whole volunteer training and then just sat on it while I was traveling, and ultimately was like, I can't go through with this. This is too biased. This is a program or a center that potentially would persuade a woman to choose based on their Christian beliefs and not necessarily what they felt they needed to do. So that experience, combined with some really hard but beautiful conversations with a couple of girlfriends that were going through experiences like that. One of them experienced an abortion and felt that was her absolute best choice. I realized, wow, there's so much violence behind pro-life. The way that it's protested or supported, the way that people go about expressing that belief can be really, really harmful. And I found myself flipping to pro-choice and really trusting that the resources need to be available for women to do what they need with their bodies. And in order to reduce abortions, all the research shows that abstinence doesn't work. But sexual education and contraception and, again, having information and resources available actually help women prevent those circumstances where they would potentially feel like they need an abortion. So, it was a big 180 kind of in my mid or late 20s, where I was like, wow, I never thought that was going to happen, that my brain would switch 180 degrees back and forth. But yeah, it was a time of a lot of unraveling after my divorce, where I started to see I guess, what I perceived at the time as flaws in some of the fundamentalist beliefs of, this is the way, this is the right way. If this is not your way, then you're going to hell. And I was like, hold on, I can't jive with that anymore. There was like this opening to the mystery and an acceptance of how on earth can any of us expect to know the absolute right way? And how on earth can all of those other people on the planet somehow be wrong or bad people, just because they practice in a different way? It was a big unraveling and acceptance process of the mystery, and a humbling, very humbling experience to have so many valleys in a short period of time, and rebuild myself with that unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to unfold in my life, but I still have faith, and it might just look differently, moving forward from all of that. So
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And you've touched on ideas in there that give us some sense, but and to me, hearing what you've said, it feels like whilst you've sort of moved away from the rigidity of certain beliefs, there are themes that of your background that, like faith, the word prayer, that sound like you're still use those. Can you give us an idea of what does spirituality mean to you? How, now that you've been through all of that life events where you're feeling supported and have faith and are comfortable using the word God and all of these things, but describe for me, what is your spirituality?
This one was hard for me when I first saw it on the email. It's such a big question. And I think because I've worked with the physical body and movement for so many years, that's one of the things I come back to is, how can we make it tangible? How can spirituality be tangible and practical, a lived experience? I love ceremony and, rituals and like the embellishments at times as well. But especially now that especially now having become a mom, the practical side of it is like where it's at for me, because I have a small human to care for and she requires so much time and attention. So what does spirituality mean to me? Tangible, practical, embodied, that it's not at the exclusion of the physical body or somatic experience, but that it's through our senses and our sensations that we have a spiritual experience in the first place. So just acknowledging our humanity and divinity and trusting that our body has so much to teach us in the process. So an inclusive quality, again, maybe as just a contrast to some of what I experienced in the church at times. And I know there's other schools of thought or philosophies that are also, outside of Christianity, but also somewhat in opposition to the body, or that, it's about transcendence or enlightenment and somehow escapism, if we want to take it to that moment in definition. But I think transcendence happens here and now. I think it's, again, a lived experience and a choice of, what am I going to do with myself while I'm here? How do I live while I'm here? What does it mean that I have this human life? And as I was journaling the other night, one of the things that came to me is that, okay, what does spirituality mean to me? It's an anecdote for complacent living. It means that I must be proactive because I'm here for a reason and there's something I need to contribute and want to contribute, whether it's for my own legacy and to support others and be of service, that there's some unique concoction going on in my brain, body, spirit that is going to help others. And that was, again, like when God pulled the plug on my job at that time, there was a little blip of my humanity going, no, I am not the kind of woman that gets fired. Thank you very much. But then in reality, 15, 18, whatever years later, I'm still working with people one-on-one and in groups and supporting their embodied life. In movement practice, a lot of times people come to it because of discomfort in their body or a health concern, or they want to feel better physically. But our body is a vehicle for all those other layers, all those other subtle layers as well. And as we start to pay attention and tune in and become present with ourselves, it's a huge catalyst for spirituality as well. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I wondered, just to make it as real as we possibly can, and I love that you're talking about it being practical and embodied and something that you physically engage with. What does spirituality look like to you? Like, what do you do in your life that makes you feel that you're living it connected to your spirituality?
Mm-hmm. So this morning, it's been raining here all week, which I am not complaining about at all. I live in Southern California, and it's, of course, very dry. So the fact that we've had so much rain is a big, big needed blessing. And the grass is marvelous. Things are just so green right now. But it was hard having a very, very physically active toddler. She's definitely our daughter because she wants to climb the walls, and she's been inside most of the week. So finally today it was not raining. We went out to the park on her Ziggle. Have you ever seen a Ziggle? It's like this little wheeled bicycle thing, but it's like a really wide handlebars and a wide base so it doesn't tip over.
Oh, right.
And she just like scoots. She's like a little Flintstones person, with her feet.
I've kind of seen balance bikes, but that sounds a little different to a balance bike.
Yeah, not a Strider bike. It's a little different, but I just decided, what the heck? I'm going to let her ride this thing all the way to the park. Normally I strap her into the stroller, and there's traffic and streets we have to cross and whatever. So we went ziggling all the way to the park, and I found myself praying out loud while we were walking through the park.
Okay.
And it was mostly gratitude, thank you for our bodies. Thank you for the sunshine. Thank you for letting us be out together and enjoy playing together. Thank you for the mud that she's squishing in right now with her feet, and the joy that we can share. Thank you for the apple wedges that we're eating, apple slices that we're eating, and just found myself talking out loud, praying out loud while we were at the park this morning. In terms of more formal practice, it's, again, a little bit sparse right now. And there's, on the spiritual path, especially yoga path, historically, traditionally, there's like 2 tracks. You can be more fully committed and go to your cave in the mountains and be fully divinely committed to your practice and that evolution or enlightenment. Or you can have a householder practice. You have a family, you have a home, you have a career. And I've been reflecting on that a lot, that, our practice during the householder phase of life is going to look different than if we're single, or if we're retired, or if we choose to not have a family and devote ourselves to our career or our spiritual path or whatever. So formal practice is brief, but every day I do some kind of meditation or prayer or chanting or pranayam. Pranayam is breathing or energetic practices. So I've been exploring different breath work. I usually try to sit on my cushion either first thing in the morning if Fern's still sleeping, or at night when she's gone to bed. Although it's been really sweet. I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago at one point, it was during the day when she was awake, and she just came over. I was on my cushion wrapped in a blanket, but my chest was exposed. And she just came up to me and put her hand right on my heart. Didn't say anything, just came up to me for a few seconds before Mama. So some kind of meditation or pranayam each day. We're not nursing anymore, but in the early months to first year, I would chant while I was nursing just over and over and over again. And sometimes to get her to fall asleep, I would sing or chant with her. Yeah. And movement, movement for me is meditation and prayer. It's as important as breathing. I'm a much happier woman if I get some vigorous movement or activity in as well. So I've been dancing again, which is huge. Yeah, that was a part of me that needed to come back. I shared a little bit about that journey earlier, and just recently, last 6 months or so, I've been teaching improvisation and going to class and, shaking my booty, shaking the dust out of my system, and using dance as that way of expressing myself and connecting to source or spirit again.
Amazing. Thank you. Because what I love about that is there were so many really practical things. I feel like there are people who hear the word prayer and they picture people on their knees with their hands together like this and their head down and their eyes closed. And I love this idea that you can be walking through a park and just practicing out loud gratitude as a form of prayer. I love that. I think that's really could be really liberating for some people to hear that from you. Last question I have for you is, do you have any advice for the listeners, people who are maybe curious but a long way from converted to spirituality? Where's a good space to dip their toe in?
Dipping their toe in. Trust your gut, I guess, first and foremost. Right? Like if something feels good, if something leaves you feeling lighter, kind of versus the heaviness, sluggishness, density of like day-to-day human life. If there's something that you love, something you're passionate about, trust your gut on that. It could be art or dance or journaling or just sitting out under a tree, listening to the birds, or, I think again, that proactive approach of not waiting until we have the time or not waiting until something like a crisis happens where then we say, oh, I should start praying again because things are shit right now. Pardon my French if that matters for these recordings. Like not waiting, just really deciding that, hey, if this is important to me and I know that this thing makes me feel good, makes me feel connected, I need to carve out space and time for that. And, bringing it in, 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there, a class once a week, however that needs to happen. I think for me, one piece, I'm just looking at my notes for a little bit because I had something that I wrote down. Yeah. Be ready to hold paradoxes, I wrote in my journal. So I feel like the farther that I go with spiritual study or reading, it's very much like a yes and conversation versus either or, like not just black, white, right, wrong. So I feel myself getting out maybe beyond morality a tiny bit, although morality is still, of course, important. Ethics and loving kindness and compassion, that's a part of what I practice, but out beyond, like, what is that quote? Out beyond the field of right and wrong, I'll meet you there, or whatever. It's like a Rumi quote, I think. Getting out in that spaciousness where it's like, I can have constructive dialogue. I can have different opinions, different perspectives, and find beauty in all of them and find wisdom in all of them. And I can let my own attachments go enough, or at least in practice, I try to let my own preferences or attachments go enough to be able to be present with others. So being willing to hold paradoxes or that relentless curiosity again of like, oh, I never thought of something that way before, or, oh, I wonder what that would be like for me to try or to experience. And I really, again, I feel like my life's work is in the realm of movement and embodiment. So taking care of ourselves physically as a devoted act, as a reverent act of love towards ourselves, towards our soul, towards our spirit, that those day-to-day tasks. And this was so evident in Bali, which I love. That's where we met. So evident in Bali that, it's part of their day. They do offerings 3 times a day. They chant every evening. There's a temple on every corner instead of a Starbucks on every corner, like in the US, and it's so permeated into the culture that it's part of daily living. And I think that we've maybe separated it, here in America, that, it's a Sunday morning thing or happens in the church thing. But I think it's all the time, if it's something we value, it's all the time. And so, yeah, moving our bodies, cooking for ourselves, those, acts of devotion, of caring for our physical health, our physical being, extends beyond our physical health. It's allowing us to have the quality of life, quality of connection or spirit that we desire. So, yeah, eating vegetables could be enlightening. Why not?
Beautiful. I love that. But, and food preparation, rather than, I've got to cook another meal, actually, I'm nourishing myself. Thank you. That's all really, so many great little suggestions in there, and really accessible ones that people can just say, okay, I can try that. I can sit down and journal for a bit. What does that look like? Just write.
Yeah.
So you've touched on what you do. If people are interested to find out more about your work, can you tell us where they can find you, please?
Yes, I would be happy to. So my website, I'll give you that one first. It's www.cheridostal.com. So I'm sure that will be in the notes. I'm not going to spell it. So cheridostal.com. I do have a blog, and that's on my brain, on my intentions for this year to be contributing a little bit more regularly towards that. Although with the book proposal, that's taking a good chunk of my energy. So there's definitely some resources there, some blogs, some free audios that you can sign up to receive. And then social. I deleted Facebook. This was one of the ways where I said, okay, if I really want to live up to my values, I'm going to delete Facebook off my phone once and for all. So somewhere in early December, I got rid of that. I do check in once in a while, but I usually post to Instagram. And then it's just, spit out through the interwebs onto Twitter and Facebook. So Instagram is where I actually spend a little bit of time posting and things. And yeah. So that's
Amazing.
where they can learn more. Yeah.
Fantastic. I will, of course, put all of those links below the videos when they go out. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me today.
I loved it. I'm so glad that we met and had such an amazing time in Bali, and the relationship can continue. So thank you for inviting me to talk.
Oh, no. Thank you so much for being here. Bye for now.
Bye.